Before we get started with today's show, I'm here to tell you about Brez Coffee Company, made by gamers for gamers right here on the Gulf Coast in Pensacola, Florida. Do you like light or medium roast? Then try the Necro Medium, Holy Grail Light, or Stamina Boost. Or if you're like me and prefer darker roast, try the Critical Dark or the Coup Slayer Mocha Roast. But what if you can't pick just one? Then try one of their specialty sample packs, perfect for an all-night gaming, or in the case of my fellow filmmakers, an all-night editing session. Forget about all the crappy coffee you've been buying at the grocery store and head on over to brezcoffeeco.com. Use the promo code DDE at checkout to get 10% off your order. Have you ever thought to yourself after listening to this podcast, why didn't Derek ask this question? Or why didn't he ask that question? I know I certainly have. Well, you get the chance to do that if you sign up for my Patreon at patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. You get the chance to ask guests of the show a question. If you're a fan of the top 5 list, you get the chance to vote on what the topic will be. You also get early access to episodes, accessibility to my film scripts, and so much more. And you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. And we want to thank our patrons, Tim Spivey and Shannon Williams. Thanks so much for your continued contributions. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Derek Diamond Experience podcast, where every week I take a look inside the world of film and television with those who have lived it and experienced it. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and coming up on today's show, you'll be hearing my conversation with actor Courtney Gains. And Courtney has been in the acting world for quite some time. He started in the early 80s, his start in films such as Back to the Future, Children of the Corn, The Burbs, Sweet Home Alabama, which you might remember from the early 2000s, and his latest project, Queen Bees, which he's on the show to talk about. All of those. It was great getting to pick his brain about especially how the industry has evolved since the 80s, because it's, with the addition of technology and now with Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all the streaming services, it's great to hear his take on how the industry has changed throughout the years. So hopefully you guys enjoy this conversation as much as I had conducting it, and he gives some great advice for aspiring actors. So if you're currently an actor or if you're wanting to get into acting, this is one you definitely want to check out. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Courtney Gains. Welcome back to the Derek Diamond Experience podcast, and this week it is my pleasure to welcome actor Courtney Gains to the show. Courtney, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, I was looking at your IMDb page before we started and was just looking at your impressive list of accolades and was really excited to chat with you when this opportunity came up. So thank you so much for taking the time.
I always say it's good work when you can get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wanted to start from the very beginning because you've been in the film industry a long time.
Yeah.
What was it that initially made you want to become an actor and work in the film industry?
I caught the bug when I was 10 years old. The first time I ever hit the stage in grammar school. There was something, I can't explain it. It was like, there was a nerves before I went on. And as soon as I stepped on the boards, there was this familiar feeling of calm that came over me. So I've known since then that's what I wanted to do. And I was in LA, so that made it a little easier, certainly. And I bugged my parents incessantly to get me in an acting class. And I took this class that I did not like. It was tap dancing and stuff like that, because my mom was in like the USO and all that, entertaining troops. So she came from that kind of background, gave it all up in her first marriage. And so I was not what I meant. I meant like gritty acting. I was about to quit, and this guy stopped me on the street. His name was Virgil Fry. He was a working actor. He said, "I like your son's look. Is he an actor? I got this class." And he says, "My son's in an audition." And I'm like, okay, who's this guy? And then his son comes out. His son's named Sean Fry. In the 70s, he worked a lot. He was in the original film with Dick and Jane. I'd seen him in Movie of the Week. So I thought, well, his son's working, he's working, they must know what's going on. So I started taking his class. Long story short, I studied with the guy a decade. He was my mentor and my manager for a number of years and broke me into the business.
It's interesting because you kind of going back to you being a child and knowing that was what you wanted to do. It's always interesting hearing everyone's story of how they figure out that's what they want to do, because it's such a unique environment that, there's no real like by the book way to get into
there's not.
it.
If you asked every producer how to produce, you'd get a different answer. If you asked every actor how they got into the business or what they should do, you'll get a different answer. Yeah, because it's not that kind of business. It's not cookie cutout. It's a strange business, and why you get jobs sometimes is crazy. Why you don't get jobs sometimes is crazy. I learned a long time ago to stop listening to the feedback from casting directors, because sometimes you could tell had absolutely nothing to do with what happened when I was in that room. I stopped. All I want to know is, did I get the job or didn't I get the job? The rest don't mean squat to me. That's you've been doing it a long time. You get like that.
Well, it's like everything else you figure out after did you get it or did you not? If you get it, it's like, well, I'll figure everything out after that.
I'm just saying that why you get jobs and why you don't sometimes can be incredibly random. It's not necessarily that you were the best guy. And I mean, I've also produced and I've done readings, and sometimes the best person doesn't get the job. It could be because somebody else has a bit of a better resume, or somebody likes their look better, or they think they can make more money with their name attached, but that's not necessarily the best actor that walked in the room, So there's a lot out of your control. All you can do is suit up and show up and let the rest fall, let the chips fall where they will.
Yeah, and a quality I've always respected about actors since I started doing the show is that you get rejected so many times, but you just keep going for the next audition. If you don't get that, you go on to the next one. It's almost like you have to have a short memory when it comes to rejections.
What people don't realize as far as auditioning goes is it's like phone sales. You're going to get a lot of rejection. If you're averaging 1 out of 10 auditions, you're doing very well. So that's a very low percentage. That's a 90% failure rate. And that's when it's going well. All right. So you have to not only have a short memory, as it were, but I think you have to have almost a certain level of arrogance and believability in yourself that they're not getting it. I'm good. You're not getting it. I got to keep showing up till somebody gets it, and because there are times, you've been in a business as long as I have, there's going to be times when you're hot, and then there's going to be times when you're not. And in those lean times is when it really tests. You could let that eat you alive if you're not sure about what you're doing. So you have to, and how you're sure about what you're doing is, you continue to study and you continue to work at your craft, and you continue to go in there and know that when you knock a room, when you go in there and you smoke a room and it, and so you have to keep that, or you go do a piece of theater or something to keep you going so you can feel good about yourself when you get in those rooms.
Exactly. And failure can be discouraging to a lot of people, but in a ways that's the best way you can learn. I've learned even through doing this podcast, doing things wrong is some of the best ways you can learn how to do something right.
The only way you learn. The first film I ever was involved as a director producer was a short I did, and I made every single mistake you can make. In film, it was like basically my film school. I mean, I spent way more money than I should have. Shot on 16 millimeter, made every mistake you could make. But then the question is, after you take that beating, do you get back up? I did a movie that Bret Michaels was the director, singer from Poison, and he was very enthusiastic about making this movie. It was with him and Charlie Sheen was in it. They were partners in a production company. And what I learned from that guy is that he didn't know what he was getting into. And when he got into it and he realized that every day he'd be like, I'm taking a beating, Courtney. I'm taking a beating. But every day that guy showed up and every day that guy got better. And if you want to look about why that band succeeded, it's because that dude doesn't quit.
I'm not going to lie. I had no idea that he'd ever worked in film before. That's amazing.
Yeah. And, stepped into directing and realized quickly enough that he was over his head, but would acknowledge it. I thought that's what was really telling, and then just show up to work every day and get better. And I was like, that is, there's talent and then there's perseverance. And, I think to succeed, you got to have both.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I'm just built that way. I just keep pounding my head against the wall until it goes through. And I don't think about climbing over or going around. I'm going through. Not always the smartest route, but I'm pretty I'm pretty, I don't quit easy. I don't quit easy.
But that's the definite truth though, is you got to have that perseverance and persistence in order to get what you want. Because, and I know exactly what you mean, because, the first short that I directed a couple of years ago, I had a great crew to help me, plan everything, plan out the shot list, all that stuff. But when I stepped onto set, I felt like I was in over my head, because once you get there, it's a very different experience, and you can either let it consume you or not, is really the
It's
best way
funny.
to
I don't
put
know
it.
why we're bringing up musicians as much as I am all of a sudden. But another story is I got to know Michael Gordon from Fish. It's a long story. He picked me up hitchhiking before they were big, and he kept egging the band on to do a video, and they didn't really want to do one. But he finally talked him into it, and the label and he wanted to direct. He actually had gone to film school. And I gave him, a piece of advice that he was like, dude, that was the best advice you ever gave me, because the suits are going to be there and hawking over him, right? To make sure. I said, here's the thing, dude, as a director, you have to make 1,000 decisions a day, literally 1,000 decisions a day. You're not going to always make the right decision. All you need to show these suit dudes for the first hour is that you make decisions. When somebody comes up and goes, red or blue suit? Blue. How high do you want the water? Yeah, that high. And he said it worked. He said it was like that. He said he did that, and he said after an hour they just backed off. And he was like, it was the best advice he ever gave me. And it's true. As a director, everyone's looking to you to make a decision. That's why you're the director. As long as if you make 1,000 decisions, you might make 25% of them wrong, but you'll figure it out in post from there.
The worst decision is no decision.
Exactly. That's when, then what happens is, if you as a director, the leader, don't have leadership, people start filling the void with their opinions, and that's when the ship starts to sink.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it happen. I've been on plenty of movie sets where somebody didn't know what they were doing, and once the crew starts sniffing that, or even the actors, they start chiming in with their opinions, and everybody thinks they know what's best.
No, and I think that's very true, in the sense that as the director, you have to, not to be a douchebag or anything, but you have to establish that you are the one making the decisions.
And the more independent film it is, the more that's going to be tested.
Yep.
In union films, everybody really, is like, this is my department, don't screw with it. That's the sort of the attitude. So everybody's more, sometimes to the point of too much. But the reason is because on an independent film, people will always, because they're wearing more hats than, one anyway, people start to cross lines, and sometimes it's useful and sometimes it's anti-productive. And it just really depends, who's involved. I mean, I've seen first ADs with a director start, trying to take over, like they want to be the director, and I've called directors aside and said, you need to stop that shit. Don't let that guy's not making this movie. You are,
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. But kind of segueing a little bit, because you had mentioned how long you've been in the industry. What are some of the changes that you've seen? Because you've been in the industry since, I think, the 80s.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
How much of evolution, or what kind of changes or notable changes have you seen?
Well, I think the most obvious, obviously, is, going from essentially analog to digital, like everything else, right? When I started, it was actually film, and, film and people editing on Nagras and things, I mean, I on the film thing, back and forth, little clips, of the film. Very different mindset today. The filming component is cheap, it's just a chip in a camera, and so the mindset's very different. Like when you were on a set back in the day, it was like you had to keep quiet and pay attention, because like you were burning film, and film was money, so like everything was more focused and like get in, get out with takes. You just didn't keep running film like now. They'll just keep rolling when the director's telling you what he wants or whatever. It's like it doesn't. It leaves things loosier, goosier, and people talk more. And I don't like it. I like a focused set. You know what I mean? When I'm on set, I want it to get quiet. I have a job to do. I have to concentrate, right? I have to do, juggle these balls to make something happen. And I'm already trying to block your asses all out anyway, right? Like you're not supposed to be there, so I don't need to be hearing you in my ear. You know what I mean? But the reverence for all that is gotten lost, and of course, it sounds like an old school guy, because I am, but it's there, it's gotten loosier goosier because so that's like the main number one thing. I think from a financial component, I think things changed dramatically in the 90s. In the 80s, when I was working, and granted that was like on a trajectory work-wise too, like you would do a film and it was going to get a theatrical release. Then the whole VOD thing started in the 90s, and the whole foreign thing started, and that changed a lot. You would pretty much be offered like, well, what's your quote? And people would like be moving that up. In the 90s, once like CAA and stuff and got involved in the foreign market, and they started taking the majority of the budget for their stars, and actors started getting offered scale. And so that was if you were not the star, you were pretty much being told, take it or leave it, and that was tough after you spend, a chunk of time building yourself up to sort of pull the rug out. So it's and I think it's even gotten worse. I think for actors coming up today, character actors such as myself, I think it's even harder to make a living. And I think that, in the 90s, I was getting guest stars pretty easily, and you would get a week's worth of work because the guest stars were kind of important. Nowadays, it's pretty much like one day guest stars. So you go in and I did an episode of Bones, and I walked in, and in that room, every dude had a resume a page long, every dude. And they could have walked in, closed their eyes, and pinned the tail of the donkey on any of us, and we could have done that one day guest star in our sleep. I ended up getting the job, but the level of competition to just get one day that's not how it was before. So it's like, it's that much harder to get work. And I feel like this next generation, they're going to have a side hustle. I do. I think residual income isn't what it was. I think that with the the Hulus and the Amazons and all that, they're not being transparent about the numbers of eyeballs they get or they don't get. So the residual income is, sketchy, and they're trying to get rid of residual income altogether. And I don't feel like our union's really fighting for it. If actors on my level do not get residual income, like every time Sweet Home Alabama plays on TV, every time Back to the Future plays on TV, thank God those two do, when it's slow, that's the check that comes in and pays my bills. So if that goes away, then there are going to be actors who are just not going to be able to make a living. That's, you got me on a little bit of a rant here, but those are the changes I've seen.
Yeah, no, and do you think that, because something I've talked about also on the show is that, with kind of the rise or the more relevancy of indie film with, the rise of like Netflix, Hulu, and other streaming services where you see them making their own original content. Do you think that also contributes to it being harder to land jobs?
Well, the flip side is there's more work, right?
Yep.
The flip side is there's more work. So, when I started, there was 3 networks, right? But so there is more work, but I think there's also more people. So there's, and now it used to be like, again, going analog versus digital. When I started, I would get a call from my agent, and then I would have to drive down there, and and if I didn't get there before they closed, there'd be a box sitting at the door with everybody's sides with their name on them. And you would have to go get your sides, right? Your sides for the audition, and then the location was in there or whatever. You'd have to go get that, or if you're big, they'd have like a messenger service come to you. Now, obviously, it's done on all the internet. I print up my own sides, right? But also, so they would get the submissions at the beginning of the day with your headshot and your resume. They maybe get 300 submissions in a day. Now they get 3,000 because of the digital. So the question is, are you even getting seen? In that overwhelm, who even if they have an assistant or two, who can look at 3,000 submissions in a day and make a decision who comes in and who comes out? So there's just too much information out there now. But that's the age we live in. So then it comes down to, does your manager or agent have a good relationship with that casting director, or do you have a good relationship with that casting director such that you get closer to the top of the list? Because they're not going to be able to see. They're not going to see 300 people in a day for a role. They're going to see 30, 60, so you got to go used to be from 300 to that list. Now it's 3,000 to that list. So it's just, the digital age has changed the way we work. And now we're not, after COVID, we're not going into auditions at all, and I could see the writing on the wall even before COVID. It was like, I'd be going into an audition in LA, drive over the slog over the 405, and there'd be nobody in the room but not to take offense, I don't know how old you are, but some 20-something-year-old kid in the room taping me, trying to give me direction, no casting director in the room, no producer, no director. And I'm like, wait a minute, if it's coming to this now, like, I don't need to be here. Like, why am I here? So I was like, well, I think that the taping thing is going to become the new thing. And if I'm out of town, say working in the Southeast or whatever, then they'll just take tapes. And then after COVID, now nobody's going in on auditions. The only thing that's starting to go in auditions now is commercials are starting to do in-person auditions again, which honestly, I could give a rat's ass about. Not my thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely something that will stay post-COVID. Like once COVID's completely done, I think virtual auditions will still be a thing. Because really, if you think about it, it's just so much easier to set up a phone and you can get a pretty cheap light for good lighting if you need that. And you just submit it rather than driving across town to talking to a camera for 10 seconds.
I haven't had a Zoom audition callback yet, though I know people who have and book jobs that way. I'm kind of be curious what that experience is like, because in the room there's a lot of pressure because you're sort of expected to get it right the first time, and when you've just had material for 6 hours, 8 hours, they call it a cold reading, you're not completely set. It's a lot of pressure. Doing self tapes, I prefer it because I could do 2-3 takes. Don't get it right that's usually the most I'll do. If I don't get it right by the third one, I'm like, that's as good as it's gonna get. Pretty much how it would be on a movie set. On a low budget set or television, you're not the star. You're getting 3 takes tops. So if I can't deliver in 3, I'm not doing my job anyway. So,
right.
But I prefer it. It's a lot less pressure knowing that I don't have to get it all perfect the first time. It's a lot for me anyway. I can't speak about other actors, but for me, I can just tell you it's a lot of pressure to walk in those rooms and try to deliver. It's not easy.
Oh, I'm sure, because all eyes are focused directly on you.
Well, everybody else has a job, right? So the first thing when you put an actor in for a role, it's called a submission. So already it's like not a strong position. You come in the room, everybody else has a job but you. You're the only one trying to get a job. So that to take the power in that room is not easy. And the only way I know how to get it is to get into the work, like make the work bigger than my nerves and considerations,
Right.
And if you pull that off, you can get their attention.
For sure. Again, that's another way that I don't envy actors, because I would probably I'd crack like an egg if I were in that situation. That's why I work behind the camera.
I've fallen on my face in auditions many times, but I also know that, I'm a very good cold reader, or I wouldn't have been able to have the career I've had. It's not like, I'm on like a, A-list level, like a Sean Penn or something back, where there's like 6 scripts on his bedside that he has to read and choose one. That's a different set of problems. Now, right. I have had offers, and I do offers, and thankfully, as long as I've been around, that happens too. But I do, to pay the bills, I've had to audition for a lot of my work, and if I wasn't good at it, and I only get maybe 30 auditions a year, which means if I'm averaging 1 out of 10, that means I'm doing 3 jobs a year, right? I know guys who are like, more leading men or more, that'll get 100 auditions a year. Now they have more competition too. I'm not right for everything. I'm not the easiest sell. So I got to be good when something comes my way that I'm actually right for. I got to be good enough to get those jobs. And that's how and I can usually smell when ones that I'm getting, it's like, okay, that is in my wheelhouse,
Yeah.
So, that's how I've been able to do it.
No, that's fantastic. Well, there are 2 specific films that I would like to ask you about before we start to wrap up our conversation.
Sure.
You were in what to me is one of my top 5 favorite movies, and to me one of the best movies ever made, Back to the Future. How was your time working on set of that?
Well, it was great, but none of us knew it was going to be as big as it became. But the story I tell is because talk about residual income making a difference in my life. I was only supposed to do like 3 days in that job, but I'd already done a day on it, and they already dropped what they call drop pick you up. So from that point on, if they bring me back, I'm on payroll. So I was around when Eric Stoltz got let go. So that was like a 5-week turnaround in production to reshoot everything. And of course they were scrambling, and they forgot I was on payroll. So I ended up getting paid for like 5 weeks, And,
oh, wow.
So it was a real blessing. And being that it's gone on to be, top trilogy of all time, those residual checks have saved my ass more than once. So thank you, Back to the Future. So that's really the prime experience for me on that project. What's the other one?
So this is one of my fiance's favorite movies, and you mentioned certain films that you were in are on TV all the time. One of them is Sweet Home Alabama.
So Back to the Future and Sweet Home Alabama are the two that are on TV.
Yeah, and I can vouch. I see it on YouTube TV either during the weekend or like on a random Thursday or a Friday. It will be on some random channel somewhere. Yep. So how was your experience making that?
Well, that was great. That was actually shot in Atlanta and around the greater area of Atlanta. Well, number one, Josh Lucas was a former student. I trained him a bit up in Oregon, so had a friendship with him already. So that was great. Getting to reunite with Patrick Dempsey again was also good. As adults, that was good to catch up. From where we did Can't Buy Me Love together, and also a Disney project. So I said, look, you, me, Disney, and another title track song. Can't Buy Me Love, Sweet Home Alabama. I said, you're about to blow up again, and sure he did. It's exactly what happened. So it was a really good experience, and it had been a while since I had a theatrical release film, and it had been a while since I'd been in something that big that was a comedy. Just to give a little backstory, just career decision making. So in the 90s, my run was I needed, I had to play 30-year-old characters, and I looked younger. I grew my hair out in a goatee, and I played a lot of Mad Dogs. And that's pretty much, if you look at my TV run of guest stars in the 90s, that's what I did. And it was at the end of that, and I was like, this is played out. But I knew my team would not be into it because it was easy, low-hanging fruit getting me those jobs. So I didn't ask them. I cut all my hair off and shot new pictures, and they were none too happy with me. And I said, well, I'm not doing any more Mad Dogs. But basically I drew a line in the sand, and I didn't work for like a year. And because I wouldn't go up for the bad guys and stuff that they wanted me to do. In the process, I auditioned for that movie, I Am Sam, that Sean Penn movie, for his mentally challenged friends. I didn't get it, but they loved the new look with the hair. They were the ones who called me in to play for the sheriff audition in Sweet Home Alabama, not my team. So I booked that, which they didn't think I could get. And I came back and I booked a TV show playing a cop. And they just they couldn't get their head around what I had accomplished, and so I had to let them go. I was just like, I went 2 for 2 on things you said I can't do. So, and I made you more money. It's a theatrical release, big film, like get on board. So I was like, well, I got a big film coming out. That's the time to get a new agent. That's the time to use some leverage and get something. So I really changed the game for me in the 2000s, was having a big film like that come out. People were like, oh yeah, he can do comedy. Oh yeah, sheriff. So it opened a whole new series of doors, because they always pretty much remember whatever the last thing is that's in their face, especially if it has some success. And that was, I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was the biggest grossing film in February. It was, came out during, like February 14th or whatever. So it was the biggest romantic comedy in February at that point. Pretty successful,
Well, I can say, as someone who grew up in the South, I can remember when that movie came out in theaters, and that was one that everyone in this area was like, oh, have you seen this movie? Have you seen this movie? And would talk about specific things about it. So,
I mean, Reese Witherspoon was already a big name, and, has only gone on to do even more incredible things. I mean, she's a talent, she's the kind of talent that makes me jealous. She can just turn it on and off like a light switch. She makes it look easy. Stone cold pro, man.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. But as we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask you about your newest film, Queen Bees. So how was your experience making that?
Well, so it was good. That was also shot out in Atlanta, by the way,
nice.
A couple years ago. So Michael Lembeck, the director, I already knew him because his sister Helene and he teach a class called the Harvey Lembeck Comedy Workshop that their father taught for years, starting back in like the 70s. And he had a very prolific career in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I did that class for 2 years. That was a humbling class for me. It helped really get my comedy chops up to a place they weren't. But when I heard he was doing the project, I let him know that, I'm out here sometimes and in the Southeast. And so we worked it out. I was able to do this part, and it wasn't a big part. It was only a cameo, but I got to work with Ellen Bernstein, Anne Margaret, Jane Curtin, and Loretta Devine. I wasn't passing that up. That was the experience, getting to work with and watch those ladies work. The first half of the scene, my character's just watching them, and I'm a student of the game in terms of techniques and things like that. And Ellen Bernstein is well-known actor, studio type actress, method, so watching her technique, or someone like Jane Curtin in original Saturday Night Live's comedic timing that you can't buy, you can't teach, to watch that they were all great in their own right, and how they all worked together was for me very cool, so. And then it was fun when it finally turned to me and I got to work with them. Now I had a ball. So I was surprised when my scene made the trailer, so it's all been good, but might as well tell you everything else that's happening, because there was a bunch of projects I did the last couple of years that are all now coming out because I guess COVID's over, I guess. Right. So Queen Bees has been out for a couple of weeks now. I have another independent movie called River. That's a sci-fi, but more like thriller, not like in space, very indie movie. That's coming out tomorrow, July 13th. So I'm excited about that. And then another movie I did in the Southeast called Charming the Hearts of Men is coming out August 13th. And that movie was set in the 50s. Another movie I did, a horror film called Await the Dawn, just came out on Amazon Prime last week. So it's like all of a sudden, all this stuff's just coming out. So it's, you do them and you can't wait. You're always like, when are they going to come out? So all of a sudden it's like, it's raining Courtney Gains movies. So that's cool.
Yeah. That's something we're going to see for the next several months with all these movies that were pushed back due to COVID. You look at all these big theatrical releases, you've got one after another now that they're starting to roll out and everything.
And all that. Exactly. Oh, and then I want to talk about music real quick, just before we get out of here. So I have a solo record out right now called Acoustic Gains Volume 1, and the third single, Let It Ride, just dropped last week. So very vintage bluesy stuff, all acoustic. And so, if you're like, hey, can that guy do music? Give me 3 minutes and you can tell me, I know a lot of actors, stink, and all I'm asking for is 3 minutes of your time. You let me know. But Spotify and Amazon and iTunes and all that, you can find my stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out, because I've got to drive back to work right after this. So give me something to listen to on the way back.
I wasn't just saying you personally. I'm just saying anybody watching this. I would love to hear what you think. You can best way to find me is on Facebook. I do have an Instagram, but Facebook, if you want to leave a message there, I'll get it. So those are my socials. See, I covered it all for you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like I didn't even have to ask.
Ain't my first rodeo.
Yeah. One last question before we get out of here. I always like to end the conversations with this. What is one piece of advice that you could give to an aspiring actor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I might end up being more than one piece, but the first thing I always say is, there's a saying, doors will open easy the first time, but if you don't deliver, they won't open easy the second time. Right. And there's a lot of truth to that in this business. And I'll give you an example. So I like the show My Name is Earl, and I ended up doing one of my best guest stars on that show. Well, I auditioned for that show for 4 seasons till I booked something. So it wasn't like it happened overnight. It was like I kept going back and I kept going back, and I ended up getting the best role that I auditioned for, but literally 4 years, 4 seasons. And some actors get bent out after not getting picked a couple of times and start going like, well, what do you want? How come you haven't picked me? Well, that pretty much is going to kill you going back to see them ever again. It's not the right attitude. The attitude is they must like me. They keep bringing me back. So you got to keep showing up too. You got to keep doing good work, and they'll keep bringing you back. So that's the kind of we talk about perseverance. That's the kind of stuff it takes to get jobs, and if you can get 1, 2, 3 casting directors to believe in you, you can work. And that's also what it takes. Getting a few gatekeepers that become fans, because those people will try to get you work. They'll bring you to the door. They'll bring you to the producers, and they'll bring you to the directors and go, I like this guy. See what he does. Fine. We want to get him something. That makes all the difference. And that only, again, comes from showing up and doing good work, making fans out of people.
I know a lot of actor friends that will love to hear that little soundbite that you just said. That was fantastic.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. This was great.
Pleasure. Great talking to you.
Thanks again to Courtney Gains for that awesome conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to follow him on social media to find out what he'll be up to next. For next week's show, I'll be chatting with Robert Conway and Eva Hamilton. They'll be on the show to talk about their latest film, Skin Crawler, which is a horror Western film. I can't wait to watch it, and I can't wait to talk about it. So hopefully you guys come back next week for that really fun episode. But until then, you can check out past episodes of this show on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast, as well as YouTube. If you prefer the video version, just search for The Derek Diamond Experience. You can also follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DDiamondPodcast. I'm also on Patreon at patreon.com/DDiamondPodcast. Be sure to sign up for that so you get early access to episodes. You get to vote on show topics, including the monthly top 5 list, the new watch-alongs that I'm going to start doing this month. You also get access to film scripts and whatever else I decide to add to the Patreon, so you can head over to Patreon for that. And of course, thank you to my close friends, the Unicorn Wranglers, for providing the theme music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their brand new album, Call for a Good Time. You can find that on Spotify, anywhere you get your music. And be sure to follow them on social media. They've been posting some really fun stuff lately. But that's going to do it for this week's show, so enjoy the rest of your week. Have a safe and fun weekend. Thank you for tuning in to another awesome episode of the Derek Diamond Experience. I am your host, Derek Diamond, and we'll see you guys back here next Thursday.